Right. Good evening, everybody. As chair of the Scrutiny Committee, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's meeting. I would like to introduce the Vice Chair, Councillor Keith Archer, and we're also supported by Steve Griffiths, the Statutory Scrutiny Officer, and Karen from Democratic Services. I would also like to thank all members, any members of the public, and there aren't any members of the public, and officers who are joining us tonight. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping points. There are no planned fire alarms today, so if the fire alarm goes off, then please treat it as real and follow the instructions of the staff to evacuate the building safely. Please note that the meeting will be recorded and published on our YouTube channel for public access. Members are kindly asked to raise their hands when wishing to speak to ensure smooth operating recording process. Scrutiny is the cornerstone of good governance. It allows us to hold decision makers to account, examine policies and performance, and ensure that the voices of our communities are reflected in the work we do. Today's agenda includes important items that deserve our full attention and thorough discussion. Our role is to provide constructive challenge, not to criticise, but to question, understand and help shape better outcomes. I encourage open, respectful dialogue and welcome contributions from all members. We'll begin shortly with apologies and declarations of interest, followed by our officer presentations and reports as outlined in the agenda. Let's work together to ensure that this meeting is productive, focused and beneficial to the communities we serve. Thank you. Item number 1, apologies for absence. Now, I've received apologies from Councillors Dobbs, Russon and Adam Davis. Are there any further apologies? No. I do note that item number 2, the appointment of substitutes, that Councillor Stanley is attending on behalf of Councillor Russon and Councillor Collins is attending on behalf of Councillor Dobb. Are there any further substitutes? No. Item number 3, declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest to declare under the Members' Code of Conduct? Nope. Item agenda number 4, to confirm and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of June 2025. This is pages 4 to 16 in the documentation. Can we confirm that the minutes are correct record? Yep. Item number 5 is the public forum. There are no members of the public, so we will not be holding a public forum. Item number 6 is the Overview Scrutiny Committee Core Business Progress Tracker and Future Business. This is pages 17 to 18 within the documentation. The report captures actions from the meeting held on the 25th of June 2025 and highlights progress. At this point, I would like to ask the Chief Executive to provide a brief update on the progress on the corporate restructure. So, Balvin, did you want to come in?
Yes, I do. And Chair, firstly, thank you for agreeing that I could dial in today. So I appreciate that. So in terms of the council restructure, I'm really pleased to say that really strong progress has been made. We are on target, as I briefed you when I came to the Scrutiny Committee earlier in the year. If you could just bear with me 1 second, I'm just going to bring up the new senior structure so that you can see it and introduce the new team. So just bear with me 1 second. So hopefully you can see that on your screens. So the new team. So as you know that the new structure consists of 4 group directors, and then our directors, including our statutory roles, and then below that are the associate directors. So for tonight, I'm going to give you an update on the group directors and directors. So I'm very pleased to report that Stephen Mears-Sims, who was previously the Deputy Chief Exec at Suffolk County Council, was appointed Group Director for Core Business. He starts on the 1st of October. We didn't appoint to the Group Director for Social Care and Wellbeing that we had a candidate drop out on the day of the interview that was a very strong candidate all the way through the process, but they dropped out on the day citing personal issues. So that was a real shame. So that role remains vacant, although we have plans to fill that so that we don't lose any traction. Kathy Jones was appointed as Group Director for Housing and Assets, so she takes responsibility for all the elements of housing, homelessness, corporate property. So for the first time, we will have a single corporate landlord service, a single function looking after all our corporate property, our land holdings, our assets, our disposals, our acquisitions, and our long-term strategy for all the council assets. Kathy's also responsible for all the regulatory functions. So what I mean by that, a development control, so our planning service, public protection such as trading standards, environmental health, food safety, private sector housing. And we were successful in appointing James Presswick, Director for Housing and Homelessness. James' background is he's worked for MHLG, but he's also worked for the Regulator of Social Housing. He's a resident in the borough, so he was just looking for the right opportunity, and it was delighted to accept. We expect James to start in early October as well. Then Michael Brereton has been appointed as Director for Development and Regulation. Michael's background is planning. He's currently works for Walsall Council. Again, we hope that he will start in October. Then moving back, then Nick McGirt was appointed Group Director for Communities and Growth. Nick and Kathy are both in their roles and have been in there since June. Really pleased to say that Jim Deakin was appointed Director for Neighbourhoods. So Jim started working with the council when he was 15. He started in the stores and worked his way up. Jim's been responsible for leading some of the biggest changes that we've had in some of our environment and frontline services. So really good that we've been able to promote within. And then Anne Boyd, whose background is policy. She's worked at the Combined Authority. She's been senior officer at the LEP. She's also got experience of working at national policy level. She's worked for the national government in the past. So she's going to be our new Director for Economy and Infrastructure. And will start early November, but is due to start informal discussions earlier than that because she's keen to get started on some of the major pieces of work. So she will look after things like our master planning for our borough, so that all the 5 townships have master plans and that we have a full forward plan in terms of our regeneration plans for the next 10 to 15 years. So that real Longwood look that we've not had before, and also bringing in inward investment. So how we work with the Combined Authority, all those things will fall into that area. So if I go back over to the left-hand side, I'm really pleased to introduce Lisa, who's on the call today. So Lisa is our Interim Director for Resources and as our Section 151 officer. Lisa joined us in August, but really, to be honest, I would say that, to be fair to Lisa, she's only really getting going because she had some commitments that we did agree that we would honour in order for her to start, but then she had some other commitments. But Lisa, would you just like to say a bit about your experience? Because I think you bring a lot of experience to the council, which I think is going to add some real value. So over to you, Lisa, as you're on the call.
That's wonderful. Okay. Hello, everybody, and I'm really pleased to be here. So I'm Lisa Kitto, and as Balvinda says, I'm here as your Interim Director of Resources and Section 151 officer. I've probably been a Section 151 officer, and my role in finance is much longer than I'd like to admit to, but it is substantial and it is extensive. I've got a number of years experience in local authorities, both at a county council, but in large unitaries, including Greater Manchester, Nottingham, and most recently Wakefield Council. Prior to Wakefield, I've spent 3 years in London working with the Greater London Authority as well, working with the Met Police and with the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime. So real strong awareness and understanding of working with combined authorities as well. So pleased to be here, and hopefully I'll be able to make a good contribution to Dudley.
Yeah, and thank you, Lisa. And I think really strong addition to the Golden Triangle of statutory officers. And Aftab Razak, who some of you will have met in council meetings already, is our Director for Legal Compliance and Assurance, and he's our monitoring officer. So that concludes the statutory officers, which is often known as the Golden Triangle, with myself as Head of Paid Service. And then within social care, Emma Matthews is our interim director for adult social care. The permanent director of adult social care role closes tomorrow, so we will have made a permanent appointment by end of October, which is great. Gerard Jones is our interim director of children and young people. We've appointed John McWellwraith as our permanent director for children and young people. He joins us in the next 3 to 4 weeks. We had a visit today from Ofsted and DFE who came to see us. They met the new team. Their message when they left us is that the one thing that was obvious was it's a single council team, a single approach with a really clear focus on children and young people, which I have to say, Gerard's approach in bringing the children and young people's teams together has been really, really impressive and get us on the right journey. And then Hema, who is our interim director for public health. So Hema's been with us. She worked initially as a public health consultant, but again is making some really, really good progress with Gerard, with Emma, in bringing public health, children and adults together so that we maximise the use of our public health grant. We use it in a way that really adds value to those residents that really need our services. You know, as a council, we're very proud of the fact that we've got our own leisure provision, we've got libraries, we've got services for vulnerable people, we've got great open spaces, and Hema's got some really innovative ideas on how we should be using our public health grant. And then just to finish off, this, I appreciate it's not very visible, but it will be on the members' intranet by the end of the week, is how it all fits in with the cabinet. So we wanted to strengthen the strategic oversight of the council. So the leader and the deputy leader work with the 4 group directors and the 3 statutory officers, and then each cabinet member has a director that is their direct support in terms of being the portfolio for that lead. But myself, Lisa and Aftab work very closely with the leader so that we can make sure that we continue that journey that we've started on financial sustainability and continued improvement, and actually making sure that, you know, our medium-term financial plans are genuinely baked into the organisation and that we've got that strong foundation. And really, that's one of the reasons that so pleased that Lisa's been able to join, because she's got experience of working in councils that have done that turnaround. And then sustained it. So whilst we've done the turnaround, sustaining it now is the key priority for us. So so I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
So on that comments, does any members have any comments to make? Anything they want to raise? Do you want to just
Yeah, thanks for that update, Balvinda. It'd be useful, I think, if you sent out an email. I understand that you're putting it on the intranet for members, but if you could perhaps send out an email to all members with a link so that that all members can be up to date with where we are. Thank you.
Of course. The other thing I will do, Councillor, is that I will also show the layer below so that you've got that detail as well. And that then gives you assurance that not only is the structure now starting to get in place, but that you can see who the key areas of responsibility and the post holders are. So yes, absolutely, we'll email it as well.
My question is more of is regarding the corporate structure, but it's also regarding the entire restructure of the council. And obviously during the budget we removed a number of positions that were advertised for roles, and work was shifted around the council. And I just wanted to know whether we were tracking how that was impacting existing members of the council with extra workloads and anything relating to that, basically.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Chair. So you're absolutely right that as part of last year's budget setting, we did an extensive piece of work to look at all our vacant posts. We looked at, for example, all the vacancies the council held, how long they've been vacant, those posts, how those roles fitted in with our new operating model, and whether there was another way to deliver those. We also looked at interim contracts, we looked at agency contracts with a view to reducing those as much as possible. So that was a piece of work. They were all tested, and as you know, we have a pay cost control board that meets every week, which I sit on. We have finance on there, we have legal on there, and we have HR on there. and we look at every vacancy that's submitted with a view to reviewing that and making sure that it's essential and it is delivering on priority services. One of the things that we are doing as part of the new operating model is making sure that we right-size the organisation so resources go where they're needed to go. So just to give you some assurance, we've had significant pressures in children's with caseloads going up, you know, the number of children with EHPs is growing, etc. We're not unusual. This is the national picture. So we have increase the resources into the Children's Directorate to support that additional workload and that additional capacity that was needed. So because the Pay Cost Control Board meets every week, we are able to address those challenges on a weekly basis. And because the challenges in adults and children's were, because of the turnover that happens in those services naturally, there are two separate Pay Cost Control Boards for adults and children's now. So before we used to have one for the whole council, now we have three, one for all the services and one for adults and one for children. The new operating model, which we are now going to start work on in terms of implementing, we've done all the data gathering, we've done all the mapping, we'll now start the process of implementing. That talks about centralising a lot of administrative resources. And why that will give us capacity is because rather than resources being directorate-based, they will be centralised, meaning that they can provide support across the whole council. And we will use technology better to provide that capacity. So the other things that we're doing is directors and managers are checking on staff morale and well-being. You know, councils are under a lot of pressure to balance the budgets, but we are targeting resource in the key areas where we've got, you know, significant pressures. But Pay Cost Control Board, just to reassure you, has revisited some of those staffing that were reduced. And in some cases, we have reversed that position when the evidence was presented that that role was needed. So every week we do consider those.
Thank you, Balvinda. Does anybody else want to make any comments on that? No. That item is noted. So agenda item number 7 is the Council Plan 25-26 Performance Monitoring Core Business Reporting Dashboard. Can I invite Claire Blunn, who's Head of Corporate Performance and Programme Manager, to present the report, and can I ask members to keep any questions until the conclusion of the presentation, please? Thank you. Can you just...
Chair, we appear to have lost sound.
You got sound? Yeah.
We have now, Claire, thank you.
Can people see that dashboard? Is it clear enough?
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. So, yeah, the purpose of today is to present the council plan key performance measures for monthly and quarterly. So we're in Q1 and the monthly KPI data is for June. The one-year plan outlines the key priorities for 25-26, and that's what we monitor against. And it builds on the previous council plan in terms of the finance, governance and culture. So we're just building on that. And it aligns to the best value themes framework. So there's 7 core themes, and it identifies 14 priorities organised under each of the theme, which is attached in Appendix 1 of the report, the council plan on the page. So in terms of the dashboard, we've collated both quarterly and monthly KPIs within the dashboard. We have circulated, Chair, some guidance in terms of how to use and navigate the dashboard. But if you want me to just do a quick overview this evening, I'm happy to do that before we go into the data itself.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Okay, so it's the overview and scrutiny core business. So we've got that as a dashboard there, but we've also created the other dashboards aligned to the other core directors, aligned to social care, housing and wellbeing and communities and growth. So that is open and transparent to all members to review performance. So in terms of how the dashboard works, you click on the overview, the committee relevant to the committee, and then we've got all the KPIs aligned to that committee with on the front page there, and then you can focus screen down to whether you want quarterly, monthly, or even latest score. So what the lovely colourful symbols mean is that the red are below target. You've got orange, which we've got on for this month within target tolerance, which is plus or minus 5% of the target set. And then we've got a trend arrow. So for the quarterly ones, you'll see there's no trend because we can't trend against the previous quarter because we're still in quarter one. So you'll start to see that trend building over the quarters. The monthly one does have the trend because the outturn is against the previous month beforehand. To look at the detail within the KPI, and I'll start with the top one, is you just click into the KPI from the left side of the screen there, the right side of the screen there, and that will give you all the information in terms of the outturn and all the narrative against it. And then you just press the back button to go back to the dashboard. So that's a quick whistle-stop tour, Chair, in terms of what the symbols mean and how it functions. And then that's what we'll be reporting every quarter going forward. So I'll move on to the... Sorry. Sure. Yeah. So I'll move on to the outturns, Chair. And from the agenda setting meeting, I think you decided to focus on the downward trends, the ones below target. So overall, we've got 4 below target this quarter and 10 exceeding, but I will concentrate on those 4. So the first one is obviously P I3806, which is audit actions implemented. So this tracks the percentage of the audits what are labelled as critical, high or medium priority. And those are internal audit actions completed by the agreed deadlines. It does exclude schools, consultancy and any investigation reports what are being done. And this measure is bigger is better. So the aspiration is that the bigger is better to achieve those audit implementation actions. So for quarter one, the completion rate has rose to 44% compared to the 32% in the previous year, reflecting improved focus despite limited resources, because I think that the team is lack of resources, and the teams across the directorates, because it relies on officers to do those audits. And although the target is below the 50% of the target, progress shows prioritisation of the controlled issues, and assurance relies on formal audits and accurate reporting by service managers. We haven't got a representation on this KPI today, unless Balvinda, you want to talk about anything in particular for that measure, or Chair, if you've got any further questions on that measure.
Have you finished? If you finish your presentation
For that one, yeah, and then
Yeah.
I'll go back to
has any members got any questions regarding that point? No. Okay.
Okay, I shall move on, Chair. So the next one is Freedom of Information Act's compliance with the timescales. In terms of this measure, it measures, we have to respond within 20 statutory working days, and delays can lead to reputational damage if it's not delivered on time. It is below target at 81.17% compared to the target of 90%, and falling, it fell short of the 90%. While this reflects strong internal processes and commitment from the team who are in place, there's nearly 1 in 5 requests that have missed deadlines. AFTAB's not here today to represent this KPI, but I'm happy to take any queries again away.
Yeah, Chair, I can give a summary at the end if you want me just to do an overview after Claire's finished.
Thank you, Balvinda.
Sorry. Yeah, so as you've mentioned, with 1 in 5 freedom of information requests have not been completed within the statutory guidance, and you've mentioned the target of 90%. I think it's fair to say that we're at a time where public opinion is at a record low in terms of trust in governance. I think a study last year said that only 40% of people had trust in governance at any level. It's fair to say that Dudley's at a point of extra scrutiny. Naturally, we are aware of why. So it's a little bit concerning that 1 in 5 freedom of information requests aren't being met in the statutory guidance. So what are we doing as a council to ensure that public trust in what we're doing isn't completely eroded? And are there any potential financial implications for us not meeting our statutory guidance, or whatever you want to call it?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Balvinda, do you want to respond to
Yeah,
the councillor?
Happy to do that. Yeah. So thank you for that. Thank you for that question. Yes, FOIs do come in thick and fast to us. A lot are sales, but we do respond to them. Is our performance where we want it to be? No, but the sheer volume is really difficult to keep up with, and I think we're not alone as a council in facing that. We do have to consider very carefully, because whilst there's no financial penalties in late delivery, we do get questioned by the ICO to make sure that which are the ones that are late. We also take into account if anything's going to take a lot of time and of the council to respond to those. So we take into account, if something's going to take more than, say, 18 hours of time, I think it is, from an affordability perspective, we also have to assess them for commercial sensitivity. There's a lot of redaction that needs to take place if the FOI request contains personally identifiable data. So it is a growing area in every public sector. It is great for transparency, but our plans to Councillor Muggle to manage this is that with the new structure, we have a programme to use technology better. And actually, one of the things that we've never really been great at as a council, and I wouldn't say we're alone in this, but what we should do is every FOI that we release, we should put it on our website. And then what we should do is have them structured in a way that when you get an FOI, say, for example, what IT systems do you use and how many Microsoft licenses have you got? And those are not unusual, that we just point them to the place on our website. So actually, my view is that we should be more transparent as a council. We should publish the information that is readily available. So, for example, we get many requests that say to us, how much money have you spent on X? Well, that's all published because we are required by law to publish all our spend over a certain amount of money. But what we don't do is signpost them well to our website. So if we got better at that, you could then reduce the amount of capacity it takes to answer FOIs and then focus on those that are genuine FOIs where individuals are really requesting information under the guidance on which the FOI rules were created. There's also another growing area, and again, every council's facing this, is subject access requests. So where an individual can request something, any information that is held about them as an individual, that again, we have hundreds of IT systems. Trawling that is quite time consuming. So yes, the performance isn't at the 90% target, but the work is to try and put as much on the website. Where we release an FOI, it's already in the public domain, put it on the website, and then start pinpointing requesters to what's on our website so that they've got the information. They don't have to wait 20 days, and then focus our energies on those that need the nuance. The new centralisation will give more capacity to this area. At the moment, we have a very small IG team who look after information governance, but they do everything from freedom of information through to subject access requests, through to other legal requests that we've got. They will look at child records where a child's gone into adulthood and can request information about themselves. Again, very complex piece of work due to redaction that you have to do, and make sure that they're all delivered very carefully. So we will be strengthening this area as part of our new operating model, and automating what we can to release automatically rather than it being manual as it is at the moment. Hope that answers your question, Councillor Muggle. Thank you.
Thanks, Balvinder. Do you want to?
Thank you, Chair, for you're happy for me to just to come back on a couple of those. Balvinda, thank you for that response, and I think you've covered a lot of it. You spoke about an action plan and a strategy moving forwards of how to improve and get closer to this 90% target, which I actually think is quite low. I think we should be aiming to meet all our statutory legal obligations, not just 90% of them. I think saying that we're only going to be 90% kind of undersells us as a council personally. But you've got action plan. Is there some kind of time scale in place for the actions that you've spoke about? And I know in the report as well, it says that the shortfall is attributed to staffing challenges with recruitment underway. Are you able to provide us when staffing levels will be restored to ensure that the council does meet its legal obligations?
Yeah, so we've recently had the IG manager retire, and we've recruited a person in place of that role. She's very good. She's a solicitor by background, so very thorough. She's reviewing all our processes and approach that we've taken historically. My recommendation is that she herself and AFTAB come back at a future scrutiny committee, which can be scheduled in to talk about the action plan and what they're doing. That there is a big interface with technology as well to make sure that we have that automated updating. So I would say that at the moment, it's probably better that they come back and talk to you about the detailed action plan because they've got that information. In terms of the staffing, absolutely, as a PCCB, we have prioritised that AFTAB and CADIA come back with their plan for what they need in terms of resources. The other thing that CADIA has come back with is training, is because there's a lot of legislation changes that are coming in, and about not only capacity but also training of our existing team who have been here a long time and know the organisation really well, but just making sure that we're adopting best practice and we are actually answering things in the appropriate way rather than, as I say, moving to that more automated process. So Cardia joined us in middle of June, so she's been with us a few months. She is taking an assessment of the IG function in its entirety. Then we had AFTAB join us in July. So between the two of them, they're taking a wholesale review. I think it's appropriate that when they're ready, that they should bring this back to this committee for you to get that update and assurance.
Thank you, Balvinder. You satisfied, yeah. Does anybody else have any questions? Pete?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, an observation on the presentation of the report this evening and the layout of the form, which I find incredibly helpful and really useful. So just to pass on, saves me coming back at the end and just doing the generic thing. But it really is a step in the right direction, I think, compared to how we previously looked at KPIs. And I can see how this could really be a useful tool in future, being able to get down to that. Now, specifically with regard to the freedom of information, firstly, an observation, he talks about percentage rather than real numbers, or if the real numbers are in there, I can't see them, so I might be failing in my own praise there. But so we've got the 81% and the 90%, but I'm not sure the comparative from this year to last year, whether that's been a significant increase or not. And the second observation is quite often, in my experience, freedom of information, many of those applications could reasonably be expected to be complied with without a requirement of making a formal freedom of information or a subject access request. Now, I'm wondering whether with regard to some of the resource implications within CAPA, for example, or elsewhere, because there hasn't been a reasonable response in a time that's then driving people down to a more formal request, whether that be freedom of information or a subject access request. So really, Chair, the question is about the trends from this year to last year, which may be giving some of the responses as to why that has dipped so significantly. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. If I could come back. I think, Councillor Lowe, that's a really good point, and we can supply that trend data. We can show the last 3 years about numbers, We can show, you know, our response rates. We can also show around the complexity of them, because the other thing that is quite difficult at times is to see 100 FOI requests. 98 of them can be straightforward about, you know, how many staff do you employ in HR, for example, and how many staff who live in the borough do you employ, versus something that's incredibly complex, that could be related. And quite often, you know, you do get press who will use the FOI system to ask questions in a way that gets them the more detailed research information. So happy to provide that and put it on the action plan for us to provide those figures to the scrutiny committee, if that would help.
Thanks, Belvinder. You okay, Pete? Yep. Thank you. Did you want to say anything? Or?
I was just going to echo what Balvinder said. To be honest, I can get the trend data for you. And
Yeah,
Balvinder, I'll go back as far as 3 years.
Okay, I'll make that as a recommendation in my notes. So yeah, thank you. Do you want to go on to the next?
Yeah, the next one, and we've got Lisa obviously on the call with council tax. So this is obviously measuring, it tracks the council tax collected within the financial year, and timely collection is vital for funding council services. So in terms of this month, this is a flaw in the dashboard at the moment. So if you're on Q1, because it's remembered where I was, you need to click on the month, because this is a monthly KPI, but we are working on that fix, so apologies. So there's the data. So in terms of, the outturn for June, it has reached it is falling short of the 24.4% target by 24%. So I shall bring Lisa in at this point to see if she wants to talk any further in terms of council tax and collection rates.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. So, yeah, I mean, it's really clear from the performance dashboard that the collection rate at the end of June was lower than we were anticipating, or lower than we were planning. I have to say that this position is recoverable, and I think the trend in the later months is that we've seen an improvement in this. We can't be complacent though, because some of the issues are to do with staffing, and the number of staff that we've got pointed at recovery, but we've also experienced some system issues as well, which means that we've had higher levels of downtime within the team, and that's obviously affected our processing ability as well. In terms of addressing those, we are in the middle of recruiting to the vacant posts, and we've seen some success in that. And we've also got a number of part-time staff within the Revs and Benefits service who've asked to increase their hours as well. So that means that we're able to benefit from existing and experienced staff and increase their hours, and obviously increase our capacity at the same time. So that's been a welcome development in the last few weeks. We're also addressing some of the systems issues that we've faced, and we have the system developer working with us just to look in terms of our processes. We have migrated to the cloud, and that has impacted in terms of some of the workflow. So having the benefit of the developer working with us on site to look at those and to make sure that we can address some of the issues and improve our processing availability time, as well as the speed of our processing, we should start to see the benefit of that in the next few weeks. So although this is below the target, I can't stress strongly enough that we would expect to see this. It is recoverable, and it is something that we expect to see an improvement of over the next few months.
Thank you. Adam, do you want to, Councillor Aston, you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for that, Lisa. I think you've answered some of the questions I'd got to ask. Obviously, one of what this council needs is money, and so it is disappointing if the council tax collection fell below target. Just in terms of some of the system issues you described, I know there's a reference, particularly on the dashboard, to some processes that were previously automated are now manual. That seems crazy in 2025 that issues that the process that used to be done automatically, that we're now having to input into the system manually, and that must be very it must eat up a lot of staff time
And just a quick question on the discretionary payment for people who are really struggling to pay their council tax. I'm just wondering how widely we're actually promoting that scheme. The last paragraph we've got here is a little bit confusing, and I don't quite understand it, but it seems to be at the end of June there were 242 accounts that have been in receipt of that award. But then it seems an awful lot of money. So I don't know if you can add a bit of clarity to that, and do we know to date how many people have actually been in receipt of that discretionary payment? Thank you.
Okay, so in answer to the first point about the system, absolutely. I mean, it does seem perverse that we've moved to the cloud and then we've lost some of the automation, that functionality. Some of it I think was expected, and we've just got to change the way that we work. Some of it wasn't planned, which is why we've brought the system developer in to start to look at why we're experiencing some of the problems that we've got. I think the developer that we've got, because obviously they know their system inside out, so they're working with us systematically to address those issues. So I'd expect to see that automation back in place in the next few weeks. But the team have got they've identified members of the team who can work exclusively with the developer as well, so that as the problems were identified and the fixes are identified, that we can start to bring those in and we can train and embed them in our processes as well going forward. So I'm hoping that is just very much a short-term problem, but nevertheless it is one that we need to make sure that we resolve really, really quickly. In terms of the discretionary scheme, it is widely promoted, but it's also the reason why we need to make sure that we are skilled, we are we're staffed to the maximum as well in terms of our benefits team, because the benefits team, as a customer comes in to say that they're experiencing financial difficulties, they will work with those on an individual basis, and they will obviously talk about the discretionary scheme as part of that. But we do advertise the discretionary scheme, and we also advertise other opportunities that we have, or levers that we've got to take the pressure off some families. So things like extending the period of time that people can pay. So the default is 10 months, but there's an opportunity to use 12 months for people who are struggling to pay over the 10 months. So there are a number of levers that we've got that can help families who are in financial difficulty or who are struggling to make their monthly council tax payment. So I think we do use it. And in terms of your question there right at the end about how many people have accessed, I don't have that number with me. It does talk about 242 accounts there in the report. What the latest number is, I have to say, I don't have that information, but I can find that out and I can circulate it after the meeting.
Thank you.
Yes, can we? I would like to know that figure as well, of what is actually left of the £1 million fund. I'm going to bring Councillor Owen in, and I've got Councillor Casey after. So, Councillor Owen.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I think it's a natural lead on really from Adam's contribution, and many thanks for Lisa for that response. I mean, it's really a suggestion for ourselves, the Scrutiny Committee, because I think this is one of the essential key performance indicators, and Lisa mentioned with regard to response potential impact of the reduction in benefits advisors could be having with regard to the council tax reduction. And I'm wondering whether we can use this KPI to actually look at the evidential base, because what we've heard in the contributions is, firstly, there seems to be some system challenges, i.e. Within the authority around staffing, etc. But what we don't necessarily know is the societal impact of austerity, the 4.99%. And maybe we can use this KPI to actually track that over the year, because I know the number of us within this room sitting within the council chamber, this is one of the areas where we indicated we potentially tell you so, that this is one of the, and of course this has a financial impact upon the council's ability to collect revenue as well. So it's about whether we can use a KPI and actually break that down into those areas where the council can put systems in place to maximise collection, but also we can look towards what support is being offered in those cases where individuals require that support from the council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Casey, do you want to?
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Aston and Councillor Lowe have picked up a few of the points that I was going to make, actually, probably in a more eloquent way than I could have. But I just wanted to echo what Pete said around the presentation in general and the new dashboard that's been set up. I think that is going to be really helpful in terms of being able to track some of this. I think on the council tax collection itself, it is worrying given the situation that we're in, that is a downward trend in terms of that. I think that is obviously due to a range of factors. Key to that is obviously people being asked to pay more in council tax and being asked to pay more in terms of council tax reduction that Councillor Lowe just mentioned there in his contribution. But central to me, for me in this, is that capacity of the team to be able to do what they need to do to collect the council tax. That was going to be one of the questions I was going to ask, but Lisa sort of covered that in her contribution, but I don't think we can overstate the importance of making sure that the team has the capacity that they need to be able to deliver this, because it is so vitally important. It's one of those things that is one of the most important things, actually, in terms of the work that's being done. So I am sort of positive in terms of what you said, Lisa, around the fact that it is recoverable. There is no room for complacency, though I completely agree. And it's one I think that we're going to have to keep a really close eye on in terms of moving forward. But I think what Councillor Lowe said as well around not just it being about the collection, but about what actual other things could be done to help and support the people who are struggling as a result of being asked to pay more. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Kieran.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any further comments?
If it would be helpful, Chair, I think one of the things that we might just want to consider as well is about how we can perhaps start to bring some of this closer into our financial monitoring arrangements as well, because obviously there is the impact on the collection itself. There is definitely the impact in terms of supporting individuals so that we're able to support them, but at the same time maximise the collection. But we also need to recognise the impact on our financial strategy as well. And I think we probably need to start to look at how we can bring some of these metrics so that it doesn't just stand alone as a performance indicator. It does feed into that overall financial position as well, because they are so interrelated. And then if we start to do that, some of the issues or some of the things that have just been discussed or raised in here tonight, we can start to look at the underlying issues that's stopping the collection, so we can bring that into the monitoring at the same time, so that you're kind of seeing it embedded within our financial planning and our financial monitoring.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm not going to repeat but I agree with what the points other councillors have made. Was that the start of making a recommendation, what Lisa was saying then? I think we could make a recommendation from this committee that covers the points that have been made.
Yeah. I mean, I've been keeping I've been keeping a track of points that people have made. So the plan is to at the end of the meeting keep a copy of these and then distribute them to members so they know that we've been paying attention. Okay. Do you want to go on to the next?
Number of customer complaints is the next one, although it is an upward trend compared to the previous month. So in terms of what it's showing us and what we're measuring is it shows the number of formal complaints upheld or partially upheld, this KPI, under the corporate complaints policy. So for the month of June, it does remain below target, but however, continuing the trend for the last 12 months really throughout the year, it has improved overall in terms of the processes that have been put in place, which I'll introduce Jenny in a moment to talk more about that process. But for complaints for June, the outturn is a total of 225 complaints were closed for this month, which is below the average, and also equates to 53 upheld, resulting in a 24% upheld rate, which is in line with the average. So at this point, I'll bring in Jenny Calladine, who's the service manager there, and she'll talk more about the complaints in terms of where the spikes are and possibly a little bit about the process. So thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, Claire, and good evening, everyone. Yes, so upheld complaints, just to set the context for those. So we get a lot more complaints every month. We define upheld complaints as those complaints actually where we did get something wrong. We couldn't justify it. We needed to say sorry, and we needed to learn a lesson and change something from it. So those are the numbers that you're looking at in those KPIs. The target was set by baselining the numbers of upheld complaints on a monthly basis in the last financial year. So 44 was an average per month, excluding the highest and the lowest figure over the year to give us a genuine average. Unfortunately, so far in this financial year, we have exceeded that target, and there have been a number of reasons that tend to change month to month, if I'm honest with you. First and foremost, that the highest volume numbers are the areas of the most sort of emotive subjects. So we tend to see a lot for environment because issues such as waste and recycling matters and potholes and street issues, everybody sees those, so we get a mixture across the borough. So that doesn't mean the area is performing any worse than any other area. They've just got the most customers looking and assessing that area, and housing, mainly the repair side of housing, can be very contentious, and expectations are. What we also do though every single month is that we look for any spikes in complaints that are linked in with savings initiatives or service changes, so we can also keep a track on anything that was unfavourable. For June, for this one, we saw a higher number of complaints overall, which is then reflected in the proportion where actually some of those we got something wrong. And the spike was around changes to the tip in Stourbridge, to the summer opening hours, which aren't as extensive as they used to be, and pop-up tip arrangements have now come to an end, so aren't a normal option that would alleviate some of that upset about something like that. It fluctuates and it varies, but in the main, the service areas are very reactive when they see something. And to also put it into context, I've mentioned that overall numbers sometimes increase. So in response, the upheld proportion of those do. The average percentage of upheld complaints out of all complaints is around 25%. So you can see for June that whilst unfortunately we've not met the number target, percentage wise the upheld complaints rate were 24% of the overall. So that spike around the tip is what's really affected the number. The other thing that we see a lot of, and adults and children's services complaints handlers are really hot on it. We do see a lot of children's services complaints about EHCPs and the delay in the EHCP demands, and I know that the owners of those complaints, when they're responding to them, very much look at what lessons can be learned, what changes can be made, and we had a conversation just last week in corporate management team with the Director for Children's Services. He was very keen that where we've got a new code of practice for complaints coming in from the Ombudsman, that in any engagement activity we undertake for that, we use it as an opportunity to try to manage customer expectation around the EHCP process, in addition to the work that's going on in the service area to address that matter in general. So I think that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour really of that particular PI and where the figures come from and the sorts of things that generate it. Is there anything more specific that anybody would like me to answer or cover?
Cuisine, do you want to come in?
Hi, so yes, thank you for that comprehensive analysis there. You've mentioned the spike in complaints around the Stourbridge household waste reduction or removal even. So I don't know if this can be a recommendation where we have relevant other committees and whether if there's a spike in complaints, as we've been told regarding certain things, that those committees need to clearly look into that potentially and delve into a bit more detail as to why residents are complaining. So even though they may not be upheld, clearly residents are feeling that something is wrong. So whether that's even a comms issue or whatever it might be, it still needs to look into, because otherwise residents are going to, and there'll be many residents that are not complaining but still have those concerns. So we do need to look into that. A follow-up to that is, what actions is the council taking as a result of the feedback from these complaints? So we can have these complaints, we can resolve them, say that, yeah, they're valid, they're not valid, but we then need to learn lessons from those complaints as well. What avenue or what kind of work is being done around not just dealing with the complaint, but preventing them from happening in the future?
Thank you for the question. Each of the various service areas has their own sort of mini complaints handling team, if you like, and they do a lot of reporting and reviewing of the complaints. So there is a lessons learned exercise that all the complaints handlers must undertake when these complaints are closed down and responses are sent, and that's generally reported up through their individual divisional management teams. What I'm trying to do from a corporate point of view, and to meet the new code of practice that the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman is bringing in from next year, is to take the lessons learned process up a level. So we've got a means of capturing that centrally, and really understanding how far that's gone. Was there a lesson learned? Was the follow-up action taken? Did we then prevent genuinely future complaints of that nature? And all of that process under the new code needs to then be reported from a performance point of view and a monitoring point of view through a new governance arrangement. That's not been decided yet, but the likelihood is it needs to come to the relevant scrutiny committee to have a look at. So we're taking those lessons learned that areas are doing, but looking at them from a more central point of view, and drawing them in from a systems perspective so we can actually report figures and real outcomes. We're looking to have that in place by the end of this financial year. We've got a working group coming together with it, and technology helping us from a system point of view on that.
Councillor Aston, do you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jenny. I've got a question. I've got a couple of questions, possibly for Balvinda. So when we look at the report and we take it as a whole, a lot of the reasons given for the underperformance, and I would imagine the reasons behind at least a good proportion of complaints received by the authority, are blamed on a lack of capacity or staff challenges. And my question is this an inevitable consequence of the huge number of vacancies that have been carried across the authority as part of the spending control process? We've got lots of jobs that aren't filled. And was this always going to happen? Were we always going to get a big spike in complaints, and we were going to get underperformance on measures? And Jenny, perhaps a specific question for you, maybe a more positive question for you. Do we monitor compliments, and do we keep a note of people who are actually paying compliments to the authority and its staff? Thank you.
Balvinda, would you like to come in first?
I will. And Adam, it's a good question. It isn't just around staffing numbers. We have historically had a lot of manual processes in the council. So are we working as efficiently as we can be to automate things and make sure that things are done using technology as best as we can. So that's part of the changes in the new operating model that we're delivering. Yes, we have vacancies, but in areas like children's, as I said earlier, we have reduced those quite significantly because we have invested. We are reliant on directors to ask for their key roles. We did delete a number of posts last year that were vacant and had been vacant for a while. Some of those have been reinstated because when the service reviewed its priorities, they were needed. So Lisa talked about revenues and benefits. So again, there's been investment going in that. What we are doing is a much more targeted investment. The issues that have been raised, and again, I think sometimes whilst you've seen the spike around the summer for the Stourbridge, the actual numbers they're not huge in terms of the number of residents that we've got that are complaining. But that isn't to do with capacity. That was to do with was the appointment system working, and it was. And the analysis that we did showed that there were lots of vacant slots still. So could we, within the council's finances, afford to close it for a day because we still had several slots across the week that were vacant? We keep that under constant review. So that sort of saving is something that helps us to keep the books balanced. But that doesn't mean that we don't keep it under review when we don't look. So the pop-up tip that was introduced in the north of the borough, that's kept under constant review to see how we can improve that. The support that when we were going through Anchor Lane, we were paying a significant amount of money for a very limited amount of usage that provided to us at that time. But that doesn't mean that we don't revisit that. So these aren't around staffing. Do we have some performance issues where we have staffing issues? Absolutely. There are some roles that in a local authority are very hard to recruit to. So I talk about people like building surveyors, quantity surveyors. Those are roles that are really difficult to recruit to because the level that the public sector pays versus what the private sector pays versus priorities like HS2 have had an impact. So the next phase of our organisational redesign is to undertake a review of grades for professional and technical grades. We've done that for social workers, and it's already been positive in terms of how we've been able to recruit and retain social workers. We now need to do it for our professional grades, where we've historically relied on interims. So that's, surveyors, property surveyors, that's building surveyors, that can be property people, where the market is really, really challenged with those skills. And what can we do as a council to make sure that we are able to attract and retain them? So it isn't just vacancies. It can be where the market is so saturated, is so difficult to obtain those skills. We're also seeing trends across local government where local government reorganisation has taken quite a lot of skills over to that, because that is one, it's an interesting role to look at the change of local government, but also those councils are paying significantly higher rates for what are time limited roles. That has seen experienced staff go. So again, staff like audit staff, we are looking at, are their paying grades appropriate? Do they need to be reassessed compared to the rest of the West Midlands region? Or do we look at alternative delivery vehicles? Do we look at a Black Country approach? All those things are kept open. It isn't just one size. It isn't one issue. It's a multitude of issues. We have a workforce that's 4,000 strong. So it is a multitude of issues, but that doesn't mean we don't tackle them. And secondly, our organisational redesign from the next phase is looking at those groups and looking at those hard to recruit roles, as well as how can we make sure that we right size the organisation. So we have some areas which are over resourced. We have some areas that could do with more capacity, and some areas where the skills that we need don't match the demand that we get. So it's a multitude of things, Adam, that we're looking at. But I've committed to keeping this committee updated as the organisational redesign continues, and I can certainly bring something back around when we've done that technical grading review. But that was specifically to address where we were struggling to recruit posts, such as the specialist ones I've mentioned.
Thanks, Balvinda. Do you want to come back in, Councillor? Does anybody else have any questions regarding that comment? Nope. Do you want to go on to the, Claire, do you want to go to the next?
I think Jenny was going to talk about compliments, weren't you, Jenny? So
Yes,
could you
please,
cover
can I
off
come
on-
in? Yes, thank you, and thank you, Chair. Compliments is an excellent suggestion, and yes, I do have them, and I am going to start adding them to the report. Just looking at the figures I've got for them, the compliments each month are exceeding the upheld complaints, and those are where we've had a formal contact to say thank you so much, we want to say thank you to somebody, etc. So we're looking at between 70 and 100 formal compliments per month. And the other thing I'd just mentioned, listening to what Balvinda was explaining, was whilst when the things change and they can be unpopular despite some of the comms and engagement activity that goes on, with the it happened the same with the parking charges coming in when you change arrangements around waste receptacles, those kinds of high volumes affects lots of people thing. We do then monitor their month on month thereafter to make sure that it's been tackled and it's come down, and that was one of those that sort of spiked for a month around the tip, but then the next month there was nothing more about it. So whilst I'm not trying to say that's not important, we must learn from all complaints. It's just to assure you that the services keep an eye thereafter on things, and if it needed a change because of it, I'm sure they'd step in and do something.
Thanks, Jenny.
That was everything, thank you.
Claire, do you want to come in on the next point?
I think I've covered all the ones below target, Chair, so it's up to the committee if they want me to concentrate on anything else.
So, committee members, do you want to raise anything?
So I promise I will let you out at some point today. So it's performance indicator 3810, and it's about the percentage of local government and social care ombudsman upheld. So I'll let you get that one up. And within the impact box, it says the second to last or third last sentence. No, the last sentence, where it says that the complaints team report difficulties in detailing information from services where staffing is low or there is a sickness absence. So it's very similar to the point that Councillor Aston has made. There's a recurrent theme here about staffing being an issue. So we've heard that you're saying that staffing isn't a major issue, but within this very item, it says that the Ombudsman impose very strict deadlines for responses to their requests, and that financial penalties will apply if those deadlines aren't met. And we've got the team here, the actual complaints team themselves, reporting difficulties in getting answers in time. So I think that needs to be addressed, because if they're clearly stating staffing is an issue, then something needs to be done about that before we end up getting those fines imposed on us.
Yeah. So I'm happy through you, Chair, to come back on this one. So one, I'm pleased to say that it is an improving performance. We have focused on the staffing numbers in adults and children's. We do struggle as a council with some of our senior social workers to recruit to those. That position is stabilising because of the work that we have done. And as I said to you, when we put the pay cost control board in, we separated adults and children's out so that we could deal with those rapidly. We have made some major changes in children's since May, in terms of understanding caseloads, bringing in more social workers, but also bringing in trainee social workers so that we grow our own. And, you know, today when we had Ofsted and DFE, Gerard, who's the DCS, was talking about how our caseloads have reduced. Sickness levels are down in those areas. Staff are right to give you the impact, because this is a transparent report for you to see. So, you know, that there are always issues with social care and turnaround and turnover. But I am pleased that in the main they are starting to stabilise. So staffing can be low from time to time in the year in teams, and that makes it difficult to respond to things like this. But we are tackling that, and we are stabilising as quickly as we can. as well. So it's difficult for me. What I will do, because I think it's really important that the failure to comply with deadlines may impact final decisions and staffing. I think what I'd like to do is get the committee a bit more of a narrative about what does that actually mean. Because as a sweeping statement, it doesn't read well. But what I'd like to see from both the Director of Adult Social Care and the Director of Children's and the Director of Public Health is, well, what have they done that's helped this target improve? So just to give you some reassurance that we are tackling it, and the blips are being tackled. So if that's okay with you, Chair, I can get a small summary back on that gives you more detail, because I wouldn't have that detail to hand at this point.
Thank you, Balvinda. Chair, I think that'd be really useful, especially with, I think in the budget we passed the fact that there's not a budget for agency staff anymore to cover the shortfall. So we just need to be careful that the impact of that doesn't end up costing us more in the long term. But I'd welcome the future guidance on that.
Yeah. So Councillor Mughal, if I could come back on that. So whilst we did remove agency staffing budgets, we also removed things like, for example, we had some contingency budgets that were held in those functions that were generic. Those were removed, but the council has put in place contingency budgets, which has enabled us to give additional support to children's. So children's have brought in additional resources when caseloads increased. And as I say, areas like SEND, you know, the numbers of children, we were just hearing today that children as young as 3 with EHPs is increasing, which, you know, is demand. These are demand-led services. So when you set the budget last year as a council, you did put in contingencies. Some were one-off and some are recurring. Those contingencies enable us to put investment in when it's needed. So when a director comes forward with a business case that says, I need temporary investment or permanent investment in this area, we have those contingencies in place. In previous years, that was really difficult because the budgets were held by the departments, and it was really not transparent as to how those were used. So for example, if you look at the outturn position for adult social care last year, you know, of a nearly £140 million budget, they came in £300,000 overspent. So that was bang on budget, really. And that was a mixture of them managing their resources well, using their grants effectively, and looking at their front door, looking at the way that cases are opened, the way that cases are allocated, the appropriateness of allocating the case to the right level, so that right fit from the beginning, but also being much more clear when it's something that, say, our partners like the NHS should be dealing with. So that as well has helped us manage demand. So it's always a complex issue when you're dealing with social care, as to how demand is managed. It isn't simply volumes of staff, it is a number of things. And in both children's and adults, we now have transformation programs that are looking at how effective is our front door, how effectively are we allocating cases at the right level, how are we using AI to manage sort of, you know, case notes, etc., to release that capacity, and how are we using the data and working with the voluntary sector better, because there's a lot of things that we historically as a council have delivered, but actually the voluntary sector are much better and more cost effective to deliver for us. So it's a range of things, but I can get both the Director of Children's and the Director of Adults to give you a quick summary on those, just to give you that assurance that it isn't looked at through one lens, it's looked through a multiple of lenses. But I just want to reassure the committee that we do have contingencies in place that give us the ability to bring in that resource where it's needed, or that investment, but it has to be subject to a robust business case. And the other thing that has been really useful is we've talked about pay cost control board, but we also put in place last year value for money panels. And these panels are managed by a cross section of our workforce. So they're not the top leadership, because one of the things we're doing is empowering people at the appropriate level to make decisions. So our value for money panels are a cross section of our staff. They look at all non-pay spend over £1,000. And they have made some really good decisions where they've determined that spend is not essential and then have refused that. So that has meant that we've been able to make savings across non-pay, but also non-statutory services that has allowed us to keep our budgets manageable, but also to put some more contingencies in place for when we do need emergency funding in areas. So as I say, it's a complex situation and it's not just one thing. But I will bring that brief. I will send that briefing out. But I think it's better authored by the two lead directors. Thank you.
Thank you, Balvinder.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, Balvinder, it was very interesting, the comments that you made about social services, and it would be, I think, useful for this committee to do, as you said, you're going to do to address some of these things. What I'm looking at is KPI P13823, because whilst I accept, as you say, it's not all about staffing and staff numbers, there are other things that can be done to improve services. Some councillors here may recall that I was on Children's Services last year, and in that role, I visited the front door and the MASH teams, spoke to managers, spoke to many staff, and the message I was getting loud and clear from everybody involved was there simply wasn't enough people, and it was causing huge stress on the service. Now, I don't think this is strictly for our committee, if I'm honest. I think, but I'd like some assurance that this is being looked at by the Social Care and Wellbeing Committee.
It certainly is being looked at by them, but today, and it's really timely, we had a visit from Ofsted and DFE, and they toured the Cable Plaza new building where we've got our children's services. They spoke to some of our social workers, and one of the things I can tell you is that since May this year, we have our social worker vacancy rate has reduced from 14.13% down to 7.96% in September. We've recruited additional staff in EDT, which is the emergency duty teams. We brought in 16 additional social workers, 6 team managers and 6 family support workers. Our trainee social worker programme, we've expanded by 14 with another additional 14 coming in, so that growing your own by Christmas. And I can tell you, because I'm looking at the figures that Gerard presented this morning to Ofsted and DFE and the leader and the leader of the opposition, that our average social worker caseload has reduced from 24.2 in July to 22.9 in September. So that gives me assurance that the investment that we're making in our staff, their well-being, their morale, listening to them, Gerard holds listening events. I've visited the EDT team 4 times at their request to talk to them. That is showing that we are managing caseloads, and 22.9 is a good number for a social worker to hold. Ideally, we want to get it down to around 21, which would be really good. But you can see that assessments completed has improved from July to September. Our sickness rates have gone down in children's services. So I would say, Councillor Archer, that what you saw when you visited, we have put a lot of investment, not only in resourcing, but also in spending time with those social work teams to hear how they were feeling. At a time when the council was going through some of its biggest financial challenges, you as a council still took the decision to invest in Cable Plaza. So moving our children's social work teams out of Corbin Road, which was an old building with not great facilities, down to through to now what is the most modern building that any of our workforce have. They've got great parking, they've got great outdoor spaces where they can walk and take a break. They're near to facilities where they can go and, you know, get food and drink and just take that downtime. And all of that is having an impact positively. And one of our trainee social workers said to Ofsted today that she, you know, had come to Dudley, but because of the ways that she'd been treated and the way that she'd been supported and the way that she could see her career developing, she had planned to now remain in Dudley and develop her career. So I'm feeling very positive, and our new permanent director of children's social care starts with us in the next 4 weeks. He's a very experienced person, and I was at a conference last week where I was talking about, you know, council turnaround, and somebody came up to me and said to me how empathetic he was, how much he talked through the voice of children, but also through the experience of staff. So I'd like, hopefully, that some of those stats, which we will send in writing to you, give you that assurance that things are changing and we have put that investment in. But it needed to be the right investment in the right place at the right time. And that's the most important thing. So what we are focused on now as an organisation is making sure the business case and the business need, so it's that right resourcing and that right fit that I'm talking about continually. But in children's, the results are obvious to see, and Ofsted heard it themselves today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Balvinda, for that. And I'm pleased to hear that things are improving. It would be useful to see some of that detail. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, but also as a committee, my advice to you is, because we've set up 4 robust scrutiny committees, this is the remit of the Social Care and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee. So again, the chair of that could provide their feedback as well on what they're receiving. Just to avoid duplication of effort is hopefully what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Councillor Holly, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. And unlike the officers, I'll keep my contribution very brief. Maybe a hint there. Problem with these reports is that they're obviously prepared weeks in advance of obviously this meeting. But as the Chief Exec was alluding to, we paid a cross-party visit to Children's Services HQ today with Ofsted and the DfE, Department for Education, in attendance. And very pleased to say that there are 2 teams, the 0 to 13 and 13 to 18, I think I'll stand corrected. And the 0 to 13 are now fully staffed. So they have a full complement of social workers. And I believe that the older age group isn't far behind either. So that's very good news.
That's good to hear, Councillor Holly. Does anybody else have any questions?
It's just a very quick one, Chair. I'm just wondering, the last one about the sundry debt outstanding, it doesn't actually have a target. So how are we going to measure it as a KPI if there's no target? And what's the reason for it not having a target?
Right. I'll bring Lisa in on this one, but basically the target's not set because it's always a changing figure for when invoices come in, so it's hard to set that target. But Lisa, do you want to?
I'm happy with that answer.
Are you happy with that? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything else they want to raise on this agenda item? No.
Chair, can I just come in and just say thank you to the
yes.
officers present this evening to represent the performance, and thank you for the good feedback on the dashboard. And we do keep improving it over time, and I couldn't do that without the team either. So thank you very much.
From my point of view, I obviously want to echo the members' points about how useful the dashboard has been, and there's obviously potential to develop that into further KPIs, and it could be a very useful tool going forward. But thank you. If there are no further questions or comments, I would like to refer members to the recommendations set out in the report under paragraph 2 and ask the officer to note any comments made by the committee. I have wrote down a list of recommendations, or what I think of recommendations that have been made by members of the committee. Some of them are stronger than others. What I'm intending on doing, if it's okay with the committee, is circulating an email after, and then if committee members want to either add ones that they think I've missed or critique ones that I put on there, if the committee's happy with that, I'll happily do that after the meeting. Okay, so that concludes agenda item number 7. Agenda item number 8 is the Capital and Budget Monitoring Report, Quarter 1. Can I invite Lisa Kitto, Interim Director of Finance, to present the report, please? And can I ask members to keep any questions until the conclusion of the presentation? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the report that you've got in front of you today is the first financial monitoring report for the 25-26 financial year, and it covers the key aspects of the budget, including revenue and capital, but also information on the schools budget and the housing revenue account. And just in terms of reporting on the overall financial health and resilience of the council's finances, the report also sets out progress on the delivery of savings as well as the reserves position. So you probably know from previous years that this is one of several that will be presented to Cabinet throughout the financial year. And the one that you have today is based on information that was available at the end of Q1 or June 2025. So it's still very early in the financial year, and some of the forecasting will develop and crystallise as more information becomes available. The report that you have is to be presented to Cabinet tomorrow, and Cabinet will be asked to note the financial position for the individual elements of the budget, but also to approve 21.4 million of grant funding and accept that to be included in the Council's capital programme for 25-26. And that's in relation to new grant funding that's been received since the budget was set. So in terms of key headlines for the committee and the Cabinet will be asked to note, the first one on the revenue budget is that we are forecasting a small overspend of £2.5 million. So this is the forecast for the end of the financial year, £2.5 million overspend. And the detail for the overspend is set out in section 7 of the report, and there's much more detail set out at Appendix A. But to give you a highlight in terms of where the cost pressures are, you won't be surprised to know that we are still seeing some cost pressures in children's social care around increased cost of placements. And we're also seeing some cost pressures in finance and legal around agency and locum arrangements. And these are being offset by the council's ability to maximise some of the grants that we have available to us. But we're also seeing some vacancy savings and some other savings elsewhere, in particular things like utilities, and they're being used to offset the overspend that I've just mentioned. In terms of the housing revenue account, we are forecasting a balanced budget, so a balanced position, which is good. It is worth pointing out, though, that there are some significant variances within the HRA. We're seeing some significant savings, particularly in relation to staffing and other efficiencies. What that has done is it's given the opportunity for the Director of Housing to look at how we might utilise some of those underspends, and they are currently now being used to support the capital and the capital programme and those planned works that form part of the HRA budget. And the benefit of that is that it will reduce the need for the HRA to do some of the borrowing that it was intending to do to fund some of those capital works. The dedicated skills grant, and we've already mentioned some of this in previous discussions around performance, but the cost of high needs, in particular in relation to the EHCPs, continues to put pressure on the dedicated schools grant, so the grant that's available to fund our schools. And in year, we're seeing or forecasting an overspend of 15.1 million. So that's an increase on the 11.3 million that was that happened in 24-25. And cumulatively, we're now seeing a forecast on our high needs deficit, and that will increase to 59.6 million at the end of the year if that 15.1 million pressure continues and remains until the end of the financial year. Now, you've heard previously, and I'm sure in previous discussions and also today, that Dudley's not alone in terms of experiencing the pressure on the high needs. And whilst that means that we're by no means on our own in dealing with this deficit, it is still something that we do need to try and mitigate and to reduce or at least stabilise. So the council does have a high needs mitigating plan, and we will be reviewing and updating that with the latest information to see what else we can do to try and bring that budget down in terms of forecast spend. On the savings, there's a lot of detail in the report around savings, and it's pleasing to note that 81% of the savings that are built into the 25-26 budget have been assessed as either delivered or on track to be delivered. So that's really positive. And in financial terms, just so they can understand the numbers as well behind the percentages, that means of the 61.1 million of savings that we've built into the budget, 50 million is deemed to be deliverable. That still leaves us with just over 11 million that has been assessed as either amber or red. And you know, Balvinda will be able to confirm this, but the pressure working with our directors remains in terms of how can we change those amber rated savings into green so we can deliver them within the time frame. And if those red rated savings aren't deliverable, what options have we got in terms of mitigating the impact of that non-delivery? So there's a significant amount of work happening within directorates and with services around the delivery of those savings. In terms of the reserves, again, we're seeing an improvement in our forecast reserves position. And you'll see in the report that reserves are forecast to increase to 36.3 million by the end of the year. And that's a significantly improved figure to the one that you thought you'd have when you set the 25-26 budget. And there are a number of reasons why we're seeing that improvement. The first one is that you had a significant underspend in the last financial year. So that immediately transferred and was added into the general reserve. So that's a really positive action. For this financial year, we're seeing a further improvement. And again, that's driven by two things. One is that in the budget for 25-26, there was a planned contribution of 5 million into the reserves, into general reserves. And that 5 million per annum is planned to continue for the life of your current medium-term financial strategy. And in addition to that 5 million, we have assessed some of that contingency budget that Balvinda referred to earlier, and 2.5 million of the contingency that was set aside for the Bickmore arrangements, that's no longer considered to be needed to support the Bickmore exit. So we are adding that to general reserves as well, and that ultimately will help support and improve the overall financial resilience and sustainability of the council, which is obviously one of the key factors and key issues that you've been considering as part of your medium-term financial plans. But again, in terms of all of these around savings and reserves and the rest of the budget, we will continue to monitor those and we will take corrective action where needed. In terms of capital, I've already mentioned that we've received another 21.4 million of grant funding. That comes in from various places to support capital related activity. There's a full section in the report, section 25, sets all of that out in terms of what the funding is for, the value of that funding and where it's come from. So all of that can be seen in the report. And in addition to that, Appendix F has the detail of some capital schemes that were planned to be delivered in 24-25, but the delivery has slipped. So approval is being sought for that funding to literally just transfer and be carried forward from 24-25 into the current financial year. So that's 13.6 million. And subject to those two issues being, two aspects being approved in terms of the new grant and the slippage from 24-25, that means that you will have, or the council will have, an approved capital programme of 180.8 million for 25-26. And there is one of the appendices in the report as well that sets out the current progress against that capital programme, including the level of spend that's been incurred and also any potential slippage that we just need to consider. So that's a high level overview in terms of all of the key aspects of the financial monitoring. Yeah, I know you've got all of the detail in front of you, and I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
Okay, before bringing members of the committee, I've got a couple of questions. You've said that there's forecast to be an overspend of £2.5 million. But then when I'm reading the planned increase in the unallocated reserves is to increase by 5 million. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought when we set the budget, when it was going to meet its target, was going to put 5 million into reserves. So how are we still putting 5 million into reserves and making an overspend?
Yeah.
So,
If I answer that, Lisa,
yeah.
previously, in years gone by, we didn't have this much detail on the financial data. Now we get it on a month-by-month basis, so period 1 through to 12. Period 4, 5 could show an overspend. Period 6 could show an overspend, and this is really for our local democracy reporter at the back to report this. But then period 7, 8 and 9 could show an underspend, as most years at that period it does. So over the year, it will balance out. So members should really take that on board. So that's why at the end of the year, Lisa is predicting that the reserves will be far greater than what we predicted at the last budget setting.
Okay, so effectively, the Q1 we've made an overspend, which we know, but our thinking is that over the course of the year. Okay, that's fine. My second question was relating to the parking strategy phase 1. It's come under the red rated savings, and I just wondered why it was in there, what was causing an issue to place that within the red rated savings. Does anybody want to answer that question, Lisa?
So that's an assessment that's been done by the service. So you'll see from the report there's a full list of all the savings that the council signed up to when it set the 25-26 budget. So they're all set out in the report. Each service director and head of service has been asked to just do that assessment in terms of will that saving be achieved. The assessment around that one is that there's the potential for that one not to be delivered in full, or it might be that we're not able to meet the income target that's been set when the budget was set. So as part of the work that we're doing with directors and with heads of service, it's to start to look at what's driving that assessment, where we've got slippage, what are the things that we can do to recover the position. And as I said, this is really very early on in the financial year, so there's more work to be done, and we would expect to see our performance against those savings targets to improve between Q1 and the end of the financial year. But that was that assessment very early on, in June.
Yeah, and if I could just come in there, Chair, as you will know, we had 157 lines of budget saving last year. It was made really clear to all directors, and we all signed up to this, that if a saving in year becomes undeliverable, an alternative needs to be found in place of it, and directors are aware of that. And it's great to see that we've, delivered so much, and so much is on green, which is great to see. But the ambers, we are keeping a very close eye on, because as soon as we can turn those to green, the better. And then the reds are where they are looking at alternatives to say where can they be delivered. But the aim is that we put alternatives in. So Lisa's right, it's very early in the year, and normally you wouldn't get updates on savings this early, but because we want to keep, as Patrick has said, members informed much more real time of budgets, savings, to allow you to be drip fed information and also see it as it changes. I think one thing I would say is this is a good position, but we're not resting on our laurels and we want to deliver this entire savings plan, because that supports the ongoing financial sustainability of the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Casey.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, the first point on what the leader said there, I mean, I understand what he set out there in terms of the fact that this will change over the course of the next 12 months and in terms of what you've just said there, Balvinda, around more up-to-date and sort of live financial information. I mean, the thing on that is we are where we are at the moment, though, and at the moment it says that there's a £2.5 million overspend, so we can only go on the data that we've got at the moment in terms of what we're scrutinising this evening. And from the report, what I can see, there are a few issues in there that I think are quite concerning. You know, an overspend of that nature in every area but housing, health and regen. And if you go into more detail in the report, even in those areas, housing in particular, one of the big things in there again is about the savings on not filling the vacancies, which to me has got to have an impact on the service delivery and what residents are receiving. And whilst I understand what you set out earlier, Balvinda, I just can't accept that the amount of vacancies that there have been and continue to be are not having an impact on the day-to-day services that are delivered across the borough and that residents think that they should get for the council tax and the other stuff that they pay. I think that's just obvious if you go around the borough that it's clear that it's having an impact. And I think the transformation piece is so key in terms of making sure that we get that right, so that when we come out the other side of that, this council is able to effectively deliver the services that people want to see, and we're not having those sorts of issues. I think other things that in the report that are a bit concerning for me as well, even in regen, you can see that there's lots of operational expenditure and pressures there around leisure centres. There's use of grants, which obviously can be done for a time, but is not a long-term sustainable position, I don't think. And things around the leisure centres, I mean, one of the points in the report is around over 800 less memberships somewhere like Duncan Edwards Leisure Centre. I know it's not for this committee to go into the real detail on that, it's for another committee. But again, that is really concerning. And what is the reason for that? Is it because of the parking charges being applied to the leisure centre? And that is a serious loss of income for this council when we need to be utilising facilities like that to generate income, to be able to put them on a more sustainable footing. So whilst I understand what you've said there, I just think there's a few issues in this that are quite concerning for me. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Casey. Does anybody have any comments that they wish to add on to that? No. Yes or no?
I actually want to echo what Councillor Casey said. We can only scrutinise the data that's in front of us, and we can say, yes, it's going to get better or whatnot, but the whole idea of us meeting today is to scrutinise what is here right now. One thing I will want to say, and it's a recurrent theme from what I've said earlier, we're already writing off £1 million of those savings as undeliverable. That's within one quarter. The first quarter, that's done and dusted. The report saying it's not going to be done. So moving forwards, we can't do much about what's happened now, but what lessons have been learned from these failed proposals, and how will future savings, and inevitably there will be some next year, be risk assessed more robustly so that we as councillors can make a better informed decision and not put proposals through that are going to fail so quickly.
Yeah, so just in terms of clarification, when we're not saying that these are failed, this is just an assessment at a very early point in the financial year, and it's based on information that we had. We're still working really closely with those directorates to make sure that we've got robust plans and how we get them back on track. So we'd expect to see some of those turn to either amber or green going forward. So they're not being written off, but it is about an honest assessment at that point. And we're continuing to do that assessment on a monthly basis as part of that monthly monitoring process that we have. But you're right in terms of lessons learned, because we are starting, and we've already started the work to look at our budget for budget setting process for the 26-27 financial year and the updates to the medium-term financial plan. And we absolutely need to make sure that any savings proposals that come forward as part of future budget setting arrangements have got strong detailed plans to support them. So again, it's kind of just making sure that we adopt a really sound business approach to savings in much the same ways that Balvinder's described in terms of investment and where we might want to make investment. We need to make sure that everything is robust, that the evidence is there, and that we've got a clear plan in terms of implementation, and we also understand the impact. So that is part of our budget setting principles that we have in place for the next financial year, and we're working really closely with everybody to make sure that they are in place.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to just reflect on this and make sure that we are looking at where we've actually come from. So what we've done in the past is if you remember, we set a really harsh budget this last year with savings that were huge. We're now saying, and this is helping us monitor where we were going and how we're going to get there. So by putting this report out now, we are still forecasting that our reserves by the end of this year will be 36.3 million. And if you remember where we came from this time last year, before we were putting these figures out, we were looking at around about £6 million. So what we're doing is we're making sure that we are keeping an eye on the way that we are spending. Plus, we are making sure that the savings that we anticipated are being held to account, so that we are looking at everything via a microscope and making sure that those reserves build year on year by the savings that we've made. So whilst it's not ideal to say that there is at quarter one that there is an overspend on children's, what we are doing is saying, yes, we've got that overspend, we're keeping an eye on it and making sure that by the end of the year we will still keep those reserves increasing to make sure that the council functions correctly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Lowe.
Yeah, cheers, Chair. I wasn't going to contribute, but Councillor Clark, Steve's encouraged me to do so, because I hear and I certainly want to take on board the comments that the leader made about we need to look at the 1 month view and then view that over the whole of the year, and absolutely take on board those comments, and indeed agree with those comments when you look at months 8, 9 and 10 with regard to the general around the 12 months. But Steve's comments concern me somewhat, because the role of the Scrutiny Committee Chair is to have a look at some of those projected decisions that are made, and then our ability to be able to scrutinise that. And just to contextualise what you're saying, Steve, one of the things we've already picked up this evening is with regard to an earlier agenda item around council tax reduction. Now, the role of this committee is then to be able to scrutinise and analyse that as to whether that, and hopefully through the Chair's recommendations, we've set that in place to see whether one of the biggest concerns of many councillors on budget setting night was that the budget was predicated on the very poorest in our community being impacted the most. Now, that was from an earlier report. When you look at this report and you start to look at some of the, when you go into the detail and you look at the transformation agenda, for example, which many raised concerns about the amount of relevance that was put in on that and its ability to hit that. If you look within the report, there's already red rated and a loss of £0.5 million. If you then look, I'm just giving a couple of examples, Chair, because I think it's important for the lead member of finance to go away and reflect on them. If you then look at the area around leisure centres, now many of us from all parties or all things raise significant concerns about the car parking strategy would lead to a loss of leisure centre revenue and the loss of people coming into our leisure centres. Now, I think as one of our colleagues has picked up, we've already got over 800 people it had an impact. No doubt we'll have the chief executive as we previously had. I'm not sure whether it be inclement weather or whatever the issue is, but I think if it looks like car parking charges and it feels like car parking charges, the likelihood is that the impact of leisure centre members leaving is largely going to be car park charges. Now, it's not to make I think our role is then to look towards how we can mitigate that around, and I note already the leader with regard to some of the areas around car parking charges has started to look at that. So it's not to put the critique on that at the moment, it's really just to challenge what our role is here. And certainly from the report that I've seen this evening, a lot of the concerns that were raised at the budget setting remain just as relevant today as they did when the budget was set. And that's not a party political point, because I think all of us across all of it around the challenges. And to finish on a positive, Chair, what we have seen tonight for the KPIs, I think a really good example about how we can scrutinise and keep an eye on that. And I think, again, to finish with what the leader was saying about this report, we've got a more detailed report than we have had in previous years. So I'm not being negative around it. I'm just some of the challenges that we have within the Scrutiny Committee to try and address some of the challenges that we have over the coming year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Do you want to come in, Councillor?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Very briefly, in response to Councillor Lowe, he will have sat on the improvement board with myself in those early days when we were trying to find every penny's worth of savings that we could, and obviously car parking charges and scrapping the 2 hours free parking was on that agenda, and quite rightly we had to turn over every stone possible to try and stop the council hemorrhaging cash, and we did that, and we've done it to good effect. And because we've done it to such good effect, and the turnaround has been quicker than even I anticipated, and that's hence why there will be a change to car parking charges later this month. We'll reduce the 1 and 2 hour tariffs and introduce the 30-minute tariff, which I think is what local businesses and our leisure centres need. But what we did at that time, 12 months ago, 18 months ago, it was needed, and I believe there was a cross-party consensus to do the things that we did at that point, particularly on car parking.
Thank you, Councillor Harley. Councillor Lowe, do you want to say anything, or you? No, okay. Does anybody else have any questions regarding this item agenda? No. If there are no further questions or comments, I would like to refer members to the recommendations set out in the report under paragraph 2, where the committee are being asked to note the recommendations. Does the committee agree? Yep.
And Chair,
Yes.
Unless there's any questions for me on the next agenda item, can I be excused?
No. You're free to go, Patrick, no problem. So that concludes item agenda number 8. Item agenda number 9. Can I invite Steve Griffiths to present the report, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just very brief introduction from me tonight. The handbook in front of you is a guide to the structure, purpose and operation of scrutiny in Dudley. This is intended to be a toolkit and give guidance to support members, officers, partners and other stakeholders in delivering transparent and effective scrutiny that adds value to our decision-making processes. The handbook is very much linked to the governance work stream of the Dudley Improvement Plan, which of course incorporates the wider review of the council's constitution. So the ask of the committee tonight is to endorse the handbook, if that's possible, and to consent to its publication on the council website. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so does the committee endorse the handbook and happy for it to be? Okay, so does anybody have any questions on this? I'm guessing no. So there are no, the item number 10 is there are no questions under Council Procedure Rule 11.8, so there are no further items on the agenda. So I declare this meeting closed. Thank you for all attending and your contributions, and have a safe journey home. Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem.